What if Gildarts was a Dragonslayer? Well, in today's video, we're going to discuss the possibility of what would happen in the Fatal timeline if he was a Dragonslayer. Sit back, relax, and let's get started. So Gildarts, who is he? Well, he is one of the main OP characters in Fatal. When he was first introduced in the Fatal series, it was literally one of the best moments ever. Entrance of him was literally out of this world, because when he entered the city, the whole city had to be moved so that he could have direct path to the guild. Like, come on, if that doesn't spell badass entrance, I don't know what does. And you tell me another entrance that could top that, because that is one of the best entrances in Fatal history. So Gildarts Clive was definitely an OP character. He had this funny, lovable side when he was in the guild. Of course, he did act like a little bit of an idiot, but he was definitely a lovable character. He definitely showed that he was like the father figure for Natsu when Igniel, of course, was missing at that time. He was definitely cared about the guild members, and he was definitely an interesting character at the beginning. Of course, we later on learned that he was one of the very first people ever to go on a 100-year quest, but to come back from it alive, because apparently people that go on the 100-year quest, they usually die, so they don't live to tell the tale. But Gildarts was one of those special characters where he was able to live to tell the tale, but since he signed an agreement, which of course we find out in Fatal 100-year quest, Alfiria made him sign, saying that he will not disclose any information about the 100-year quest, which he did not. But what he did do was, at that time, he showed Natsu a big scar that he got from Acnologia, who he thought was one of the god dragons, but he was not. So he showed Natsu this big giant scar that he had, and of course he said that that dragon that he tried to fight was definitely a dragon of evil. But this is where it gets interesting. So Gildarts' magic, of course, is break magic, where he's able to literally shatter anything into a million pieces. We saw a glimpse of it, of course, when he was fighting Blue Note, even Natsu. But the main thing was, how could this affect Acnologia? Because Acnologia is immune to all type of magic. So when in the Tenro Island arc, when Acnologia showed up and Gildarts was fearing for his life, you could tell that when Acnologia was fighting everyone else, he was showing off a little bit of a show, but for some reason Gildarts knew that he wasn't going serious because he wasn't using the same type of magic when he was facing him. Now that got me thinking a bit. So imagine, rather than Gildarts of course having the break magic, it was a dragon slaying break magic instead. So he was able to harness his immense power that he has, and he was able to fight Acnologia because he also has dragon slaying magic, which of course is used to slay dragon slayers. So let's say if he had break dragon slaying magic, that would literally make him OP versus Acnologia, because first of all, he wouldn't have run away or been defeated by Acnologia at that time when he was on the 100-year quest. He would have been able to fight back, and he would probably been able to deal a decent amount of damage to Acnologia. But sadly, since he had normal magic, this is what we got. But what if, let's say way at the beginning, Gildarts was also a Dragon Slayer? So his Dragon Slayer magic of course was break, and he was versus Acnologia whilst he was on the 100-year quest. I could probably say it would have gone one of two ways. Gildarts was probably going to be an equal match for Acnologia because they probably were at equal level at that time, but of course Gildarts could have damaged him because of his normal magic. But with Dragon Slayer magic infused with his normal magic, most likely he might have been able to deal quite serious blows to Acnologia, and it would have been very hard, and Acnologia might have just run away from the battle because he was probably too scared to take on Gildarts, who of course we all know is very OP. So imagine this, if Gildarts did have Dragon Slayer magic, it would affect the timeline quite a bit, because firstly, he probably would not have returned from the 100-year quest sooner than we thought. He probably would have still been on it whilst Natsu and the crew of course just finished the Fatal Battle Royale, and he probably would have finally found out who the real actual god dragons are, and he would have had to battle them to find out, of course, how to seal them and how to really show that, well, to calm down, because they were literally a threat to humanity. If these 5 god dragons weren't sealed away, it would cause massive turmoil, of course, and that is the main part of the 100 quest. to of course seal all 5 god dragons and bring peace. So Gildarts would have of course beaten up Acnologia quite a bit. Acnologia would have run away, let's say for example, and then when Gildarts of course finally faced one of the god dragons, let's say for example he faced Alderon, the wood god dragon, which of course was the very first god dragon ever defeated by the crew. So let's say for example he faced Alderon, but of course Alderon at that time he was still in his little seal thing, because technically the only person that broke the seal in the Fatal 100-year quest was the White Wizard. So there was no White Wizard, there was no breaking or unsealing of orbs, so technically Alderon was a sitting duck. So Gildarts would easily be able to slay and seal the wood god dragon, no issues there. But then it moves on to an even more difficult challenge. Let's say he had to fight versus Mercphobia, the water god dragon. So Mercphobia is a very kind and gentle spirit, but of course his dragon god magic is definitely overpowered quite a bit. So how would Gildarts face versus a water god dragon Mercphobia? Well, I believe he definitely would have been put off quite a big battle, and most likely he might have barely been able to defeat Mercphobia. But of course Ignia might have came in out of nowhere to help of course Gildarts to try and defeat Mercphobia, which they probably did, but Gildarts then realized that he doesn't have enough power to actually defeat all 5 god dragons, because if the level kept going up and up and up, he was definitely no match for him. So that's when he probably realized that god dragons are definitely a lot more powerful. But he also starts to question, then who was the black dragon that he fought before? Well, probably Alspheria reveals to him that that was a dark dragon Acnologia, and he's not a god dragon, he's king of all dragons, and technically at one point he was much more powerful than the god dragons. But most likely now that's changed with all of the time moving on and the god dragons apparently powering up after 400 years, which is quite weird. So going back to Gildarts, again the timeline would have changed quite a bit, because if Gildarts was still on the 100-year quest, technically he would not have been on the Tenro Island arc, and he wouldn't have been able to, let's say, help the crew when they were trying to fight off Acnologia, even though Gildarts didn't do much at the beginning, and nobody, technically if Gildarts wasn't even on the Tenro Island, there would have been nobody versus Blue Note, so that would have been very difficult for the crew to defeat Blue Note and then Master Harris, which was the main person that was a villain at that time. So again, Gildarts being a Dragonslayer would have affected those times. Let's say, for example, let's do another scenario where Gildarts, he fought Acnologia but was badly defeated by him, so he came back to the crew, well, came back to the guild, and the normal timeline went on ahead. He of course came back to the guild, rested up for a bit, and then they went on the Tenro Island arc and he fought Blue Note and Fairy Tail was victorious. But then out of nowhere Acnologia came. So before, Gildarts did nothing in the fight versus Acnologia because he knew how powerless he was using only his normal break magic. But if he was able to imbue himself with Dragonslayer magic and he was able to remember the time where he was badly defeated by it, most likely he would have been able to be the only one to hold back off Acnologia while the rest of the crew try to escape the island. Now imagine that, as the crew are trying to defeat Acnologia but Gildarts knows Acnologia is not showing his true cards yet, he then steps forward, releases his full power like he did versus Natsu, and he says, "You guys, stay back, I've got this." And he goes forward and he says, "You guys, make a run for it, I'm gonna hold him back as far as I can, but don't you dare turn back. This is my battle between Acnologia, don't you any of you get involved." So then everyone of course runs away, they get on their boats and they sail away from Tenro Island, and Gildarts is left alone to face Acnologia. Now that would have been a sick battle, because firstly, the crew would have been suspended in time for 7 years. Secondly, they wouldn't have been able to create the giant sphere, which is a fairy sphere which Mavis created as the ultimate protection. So we don't know the full details about fairy sphere because it requires a great amount of friendship to generate, and Mavis of course her spirit form was technically there, so she could still conjure it up. So maybe as the battle was going on between Fate, Acnologia and Gildarts, most likely Mavis was still witnessing the whole thing, and before Acnologia could deal the final strike, Mavis created the fairy sphere, protecting Gildarts but also sinking it down into the ocean, just like it was in the normal arc. So technically the only person that would be stuck on Tenro Island would be Gildarts. So imagine that. Imagine Gildarts being the only person left and the rest of the crew technically were able to live out the 7-year gap as they normally would. They would have gone on missions, they would have powered up as normal, and everything would have been fine. But the only person that would be missing out on it would be Gildarts. So again, if you want a part 2 for this, and want me to discuss further in timeline what if Gildarts were Dragonslayer, how would it change this scenario or that one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because I love doing these what if videos, and it gives you a whole new meaning and a whole new sense to the storyline if one little thing was changed. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care and peace.